Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis, where we kind of unpack this link, between brilliant minds and mental illness. You know what I mean? Like, are they connected?
Yeah.
So today, we're really going deep into Bobby Fischer,
Okay.
the chess prodigy, and we're using Frank Brady's biography, Endgame, as like our main source, our guide.
A life, I would say, that was just a whirlwind of contradictions.
Absolutely. And, Brady just throws us right in, like, boom, right into this scene.
Okay.
It's July 2004. Fisher's in like a Japanese jail cell.
Oh, wow.
And he's terrified. And he's convinced that he's like about to be extradited to the U.S. and murdered, in prison. That's what he thinks.
It's such a gripping start to the book, and it really sets the stage for, the extremes that define Fisher's life, right? The genius, the paranoia, the isolation, and of course the brilliance. All these things are just kind of swirling together. And what's so fascinating to me is that this paranoia, this fear of persecution, it seemed to be there even when he was, becoming super famous.
That's true. So that begs a question, right? Like, was it a byproduct of the pressure, the Cold War tension?
Right.
Or was there something, deeper there?
It's a question that Brady kind of grapples with throughout the entire book. And to understand Fisher, he takes us back to his childhood.
Yeah.
So Fisher was born in 1943, and his early life, well, it wasn't exactly, a fairy tale.
Right.
Absent father, strong-willed mother, struggling to make ends meet. I mean, not exactly a recipe for stability.
No.
But at 6 years old, he discovers chess. And it's not just a game. It becomes like an obsession for him.
He excels at it so quickly, it's unbelievable. Surpassing like adult players while still a child. I mean, can you imagine, as someone who plays chess, a child.
I know.
Just destroying like seasoned players' strategies.
Yeah.
What level of, cognitive ability does that even take?
Exactly. And it's interesting because you can see even back then, signs of what we might recognize now as like obsessive compulsive traits. Brady describes these incredibly rigid habits, like, for example, Fisher dictating how long his mother could stay at the chess club. It's like, wow.
Oh, wow.
The inflexibility, the need for control, those are hallmarks of OCD, which, is often linked to high intelligence.
So it's like chess almost gave him this structure, this order that he just craved.
Absolutely.
And any disruption to that, like a lost game or something, would be catastrophic for him.
It's a great point. And this need for control, it only intensifies as he gets older. You see it in the demands for these like really specific conditions during matches.
Right.
It's the sudden withdrawals, the complete social isolation. It's all there.
But, even with all of that, there are these moments of pure brilliance. Take, for example, the game of the century. Fisher was just 11 years old. It wasn't just a win. It was like the showcase of his crazy ability to think ahead, like multiple moves ahead, like almost anticipate his opponents, like every thought.
Absolutely. And psychologists today, they speculate that Fisher might have been on the autism spectrum.
Oh, interesting.
And that kind of strategic thinking, it's often associated with high-functioning autism.
That's fascinating. And it's so interesting how his childhood obsession with chess almost became like America's obsession during the Cold War. Because remember, at this time, the Soviets were just dominating the game.
They were.
And America was desperate for a champion. It's almost like the entire nation was like projecting their anxieties onto this young boy, this kid.
It's true. And in a way, Fisher embraced that role.
Yeah.
He kind of reveled in the pressure, in the challenge of taking on the Soviet chess machine. But it's hard to imagine, like, how any child could really handle that kind of weight on their shoulders.
That's true.
It's no wonder his behavior became, increasingly erratic. Brady really highlights Fisher's growing paranoia.
Yeah.
How he became convinced the Soviets were colluding against him, demanding special conditions, withdrawing from tournaments, like at a moment's notice. It's like,
You make such a good point about the Cold War pressure and everything. But doesn't Brady also suggest that Fisher's paranoia like predates his fame? Like, what about his outburst during the 1959 candidates tournament?
Right.
Where he like accused the Soviets of cheating.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so difficult to separate, the internal factors from the external pressures. Like, was Fisher's paranoia just a product of his personality? Or did the Cold War environment kind of amplify it? It's hard to say.
It really is like a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
Like, did the pressures of being a prodigy exacerbate his mental health?
Yeah.
Or were those issues always there and they kind of pushed him toward this like solitary world of chess? It's impossible to know. But one thing is for sure, Fischer's personality, it didn't really mesh with the world of professional chess.
No, he clashed with the establishment. You know, he had feuds with organizers.
Right.
And he even alienated some of his fellow players. Like, come on.
He really was brilliant, but troubled.
Yeah.
Like, deeply troubled.
Absolutely. And Endgame really doesn't shy away from those complexities. It paints a very nuanced portrait of Fischer. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how his brilliance in chess almost seemed to, like, fuel these darker parts of his personality.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, there's this one part in the book, Fischer's having dinner with a friend.
Okay.
And he's completely oblivious to everything around him. Like, he's in his own world, replaying a chess match in his head, whispering moves, like strategizing against his invisible opponent.
Yeah. And the friend describes him as being more intense in that moment than he was during an actual tournament. It's like chess was the only reality for him.
Wow.
The only thing that truly mattered. Everything else was just noise.
So then his need for recognition is almost kind of paradoxical.
Right.
Like, he wanted to be the best, to be acknowledged as the greatest, but then he pushed people away, isolated himself. Like, how do you reconcile those two things?
Exactly. It's another layer of the contradiction that was Bobby Fischer. He craved this validation, but he also feared, like, intimacy, feared being known, maybe even feared failing.
That's an interesting point. That fear of failing, maybe that explains his, like, increasingly outrageous behavior.
Possibly.
Like, he was pushing people away,
Yeah.
but at the same time demanding their attention.
It's that push-pull dynamic, you know? We see it time and time again with these, like, brilliant, troubled minds.
Yeah.
And in Fischer's case, it all culminated in his 1972 World Championship victory, right? Against Boris Spassky.
What a moment that was. The Cold War, the intensity of the match, Fischer's, antics, his demands, that whole near forfeiture thing. It was captivating.
It was a clash of titans.
Yeah.
And Fischer, even with all of his, eccentricities, emerged victorious. But instead of bringing him peace or stability, the win seemed to amplify his paranoia, his reclusiveness.
He vanished from public life, refused to defend his title, and when he did resurface, it was with these increasingly disturbing anti-Semitic and anti-American views.
It's heartbreaking to see this brilliant mind just consumed by darkness, embracing conspiracy theories, alienating his friends and family. His descent into isolation, it became even more profound.
It's true. Brady doesn't shy away from those troubling parts of Fischer's personality. He presents them, without flinching. It makes us confront this uncomfortable truth. Genius can be intertwined with hate.
Absolutely.
But, Endgame isn't just about decline and downfall. Brady also highlights the moments of pure brilliance that, cemented Fischer's place in chess history.
His games were revolutionary. You mentioned the game of the century earlier. But take his victory over Taimanov in 1971. 6-0 sweep. Unheard of at that level.
Wow.
It sent shockwaves through the chess world.
And his contributions to opening theory. I mean, this is huge. Before Fischer, the Sicilian defense, it's considered pretty risky. But he turned it into a weapon. He proved its, aggressive potential.
It's true. Fischer wasn't just playing chess. He was creating art. And I think that's what makes his story so tragic. This incredible talent, this potential to revolutionize the game, ultimately overshadowed by his inner demons.
So we're back to this central question. Was Fischer's genius inseparable from his mental illness? Were his obsessive nature, his paranoia, his need for control, were those all essential ingredients in his brilliance?
That's the million-dollar question. And, experts have debated it for years.
Right.
It's tempting to draw a direct line between his mental state and his genius.
Right.
But then you have these moments, like his win over Taimanov, a display of strategic brilliance that kind of transcended any psychological turmoil. So was his mental illness a hindrance or a catalyst? Or was it something else entirely? We don't know.
And that's what makes Endgame so fascinating. Brady doesn't give you easy answers.
No.
He gives you the facts, the anecdotes, the insights, and lets the reader kind of form their own conclusions.
Which is what makes it such a powerful and enduring work. It's a biography that goes beyond the genre, It becomes this meditation on the nature of genius itself.
Absolutely, because when we talk about genius, we often focus on the achievements, the accolades.
Right.
But Endgame forces us to look at the cost, the human toll of that brilliance.
Exactly. And it makes us wonder, what role did his environment play? How did the pressures of being a child prodigy, a Cold War pawn, impact his mental health?
It's a good question. And Brady does dive into Fisher's childhood, right? Revealing some pretty fascinating insights. Like, for example, he talks about how Fisher was bullied as a kid, often targeted with these anti-Semitic taunts.
Yeah. And those experiences, they must have had a profound impact on his developing psyche, especially for someone who's already predisposed to paranoia and social anxiety.
And then there's his relationship with his mother, Regina.
Right.
Strong, independent woman, but she struggled financially and emotionally.
And she was a staunch supporter of Fisher's chess career, but she also worried about his, obsessive nature.
Of course.
Brady doesn't shy away from the tension and contradictions in their relationship.
No, he doesn't. It's clear that Fisher, both adored and resented his mother, relying on her support, but at the same time, craving independence.
And that push-pull dynamic just continued throughout his whole life.
Right.
Pushing people away, then lashing out when they abandoned him. It's like he was constantly caught between wanting connection and fearing intimacy.
And that fear just intensified as his paranoia and anti-Semitism took hold.
Yeah.
He retreated further and further into this world of conspiracy theories and delusions, cutting himself off from, anyone who might challenge his worldview.
It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck.
Yeah, you see the warning signs, the red flags.
But you can't seem to stop the inevitable crash.
But amidst all the darkness, Brady reveals these, surprising glimpses into Fisher's humanity.
Like his love of musicals. Who knew that the chess prodigy was a huge fan of My Fair Lady?
I know, right? It's those little details that make the darker aspects of his personality even more tragic. It's like you see this flicker of warmth, of vulnerability, and then poof, it's gone.
Swallowed up by the paranoia and anger.
There's this one story. Fisher's at a restaurant, completely absorbed in a chess match, in his head, and he suddenly bursts out singing a line from The March of the Smugglers, from Bizet's Carmen.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Can you imagine? The chess prodigy, lost in his world, serenading a table full of, startled diners.
It's both hilarious and heartbreaking.
I know. It just speaks to those contradictions that define Fisher's life. Capable of beauty and creativity, but also cruelty and hatred. And it seems like in his later years, the darkness just completely consumed him.
His decline is really painful to read about. Brady chronicles his nomadic years, his descent into anti-Semitism, his increasingly erratic behavior. It's a reminder that genius doesn't make you immune to suffering.
And it raises so many questions about the nature of genius itself. Is there a link between brilliance and madness? Can we separate the art from the artist? Can we appreciate Fisher's contributions to chess without condoning his hateful views?
Those are questions that have no easy answers. And Endgame doesn't pretend to offer them. It presents us with this flawed, brilliant, troubled individual and asks us to, grapple with the contradictions.
And in a way, that's what we do here on the Mad Genius Thesis, right? We explore these brilliant minds, these individuals who made these remarkable contributions to their fields, but we acknowledge that their brilliance often comes with, this darkness, mental illness, personal struggles.
Bobby Fischer's life, it's a testament to the fact that genius doesn't protect you from suffering. It's a reminder to be compassionate and understanding when it comes to mental health, to recognize that even the brightest minds can be vulnerable.
Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. We're continuing our look at Bobby Fischer, this complicated life, through Brady's Endgame. And it's striking how many different people kind of come in and out of the picture, impacting his journey.
It really is like a revolving door of mentors, rivals, people who tried to help him, to support him.
Right. And each one leaves their mark on this really enigmatic figure. One that stands out is Jack Collins, Fisher's childhood chess mentor.
Yeah, Collins.
Brady describes this really warm friendship, spending hours analyzing matches, playing speed chess. They talk about everything from strategy to baseball, even philosophy. It's clear Collins was key in nurturing Fisher's talent.
Definitely. He recognized Fisher's potential early on and gave him that guidance and support, especially in those crucial early years. But as Fisher got more famous, the gap in their chess skills widened. And that created some tension.
Yeah, makes sense. Fisher, always the competitor.
Always.
He started criticizing Collins' abilities.
Yeah.
Even making, kind of mean comments about his rating, behind his back. And as a chess player, Your rating is everything.
Oh, yeah. It's like a badge of honor.
Right. It measures your skill, your potential, like where you stand in the chess world.
Absolutely. It's almost like a social hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly. And Fischer, even with all his genius, he wasn't above that. He judged people, even his close friends, based on their rating.
Which, again, points to that insecurity we talked about.
Right.
The constant need to prove himself, to be the absolute best, even if it meant putting others down,
It's such a sad flaw, really. And it definitely contributed to his isolation.
For sure.
And speaking of isolation, there's this other interesting character, Dmitry Bielica, a Yugoslavian chess journalist who befriended Fischer during that 1959 candidates tournament.
Ah, yes, Bielica. That's the tournament where Fischer had that huge meltdown, accusing the Soviets of, all that cheating and conspiring.
Exactly.
And Bielica, he actually understood Fischer's complaints. Even though a lot of people just dismissed them as paranoia, he tried to help Fischer calm down.
There's this almost funny scene. Bielica takes Fischer to the movies the night before this big match, right?
Okay.
And the only English language film playing is Lust for Life. That biopic about Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, wow. The irony.
Right. Almost too perfect. It's like foreshadowing Fischer's own descent into, what some might call madness.
Right. This brilliant mind battling these inner demons, and the whole world is watching.
And you can't help but wonder, did Fischer see himself in Van Gogh? Another brilliant artist, tormented, ultimately succumbing to, his struggles.
It's a haunting thought.
It is. And then there's Herbert W. Armstrong, the leader of the Worldwide Church of God, a very controversial figure in Fischer's life.
Yeah, Armstrong, with his preaching about doomsday and spiritual purity, it seems like it really got to Fischer, who was already prone to paranoia.
Absolutely. Brady explains how Fischer became fixated on Armstrong's teachings. He even tried to convert his own mother.
Wow.
But, like most of Fischer's relationships, this one ended badly.
Of course.
He accused Armstrong of hypocrisy, financial stuff, and cut ties with the church.
It's interesting how this pattern just repeats itself throughout his life. He needs connection, finds mentors, friends, but then pushes them away, almost violently.
It all goes back to that conflict within him, the need for approval, but the fear of getting close. And sadly, it seems that the darker side of him won in the end.
It did.
Yeah.
And Brady doesn't try to hide that. Fischer's decline, the anti-Semitism, the hate, it's all there. Those radio rants, the disturbing things he said, it's tough to read. A reminder that brilliance doesn't equal, being a good person.
Yeah. There are moments that are just chilling. Like his reaction to 9/11.
I know.
He showed almost no empathy for the victims.
It's jarring when you think about the brilliance he showed in chess.
It is. But even in those dark times, Brady finds these little glimpses of the old Bobby Fischer, the chess genius, the sharp observer of people.
Like that story when Fischer's in Iceland near the end.
Yeah.
He's talking to his friend Gardar Sverrisson about religion. Fischer had, rejected all organized religion by then. But then he starts quoting this song by Les Crane, a talk show host, about how everyone has a right to be here.
Wow. Such a tender moment, a flicker of humanity amidst all that darkness.
It is, and it reminds us that even in the most troubled souls, there can be moments of grace, of compassion.
And it's these complexities, right, that make Endgame such a powerful book. It doesn't offer easy answers, simple judgments. It shows us this flawed, brilliant, troubled person. And it asks us to deal with the contradictions.
It does, and in a way, that's what we try to do here on the Mad Genius Thesis. We look at these brilliant minds, the people who made these incredible contributions, but we also acknowledge the darkness that often comes with it, the mental illness, the struggles.
Exactly. And Bobby Fischer's life shows us that genius doesn't protect you from pain. It reminds us to be compassionate when it comes to mental health, to understand that even the most brilliant minds can be fragile.
Endgame is a challenging read, but it's so rewarding. It makes us face some tough truths about ourselves, about what genius means, and about just being human.
It does. And to our listeners, we encourage you to pick up Endgame and decide for yourself. Was Fischer's genius linked to his struggles? Was he a victim of his circumstances, or did he create his own downfall? These are questions worth thinking about. Maybe there aren't easy answers, but they can help us understand ourselves and the world a little better.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Bobby Fischer's life. We hope it sparked some interesting thoughts and inspired you to explore, the complexities of the human mind. Until next time, keep learning and keep questioning your own assumptions.